It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Don't forget our Patreon. You can go to our Patreon there and get all the shows we put up Monday to Friday, AM/FM radio, for ad-free. We cut out all the commercials. So if you ever miss a show, you can join Patreon and get all the shows over there. And, of course, our archives you can find as a podcast on Spreaker.com. And if you go to Spreaker.com, you look up Mike Rothmiller. We've done about 10 shows. The guy's always working on a book, man. The latest one is Frank Sinatra and the Mafia Murders. But we just had him on like not even a year ago, I don't think. Bombshell, the night Bobby Kennedy killed Marilyn Monroe. Probably one of the most popular topics on this show is the murder of Marilyn Monroe. And then, of course, the old ones, man. L.A. Secret Police, inside the LAPD elite spy networks. Those are some great, great stories, man, about his work in the LAPD intelligence unit. Secret Lies and Deception, top secret presidential telephone transcripts, top secret presidential letters, top secret documents, and other amazing pieces of history. Mike Rothmiller, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, man, thanks so much for coming back. You always bring the goods, man. You always got it, man. But remind the audience, tell them who is Mike Rothmiller?
Okay, going back, I started with the LAPD when I was 21. I worked 10 years there. I worked vice patrol training officer. I was a patrol supervisor. I became a detective in the last 5 years, and I was working the LAPD Organized Crime Intelligence Unit, which was the most sensitive and most secretive division within LAPD history. A little background on that. It was started in 1932. Much like the FBI, it maintained dossiers on anybody who wielded power, not just in L.A., but across the country and some international people. And so we had dossiers on every mob guy from the 30s you can imagine, major players, minor players. We had all the entertainers that you could think of, major entertainers and medium-sized entertainers, if you want to say that, and certainly all politicians, all presidents from that time frame on. So it was a massive intelligence gathering operation, and was very critical is that when I was there were roughly, at any given time, 55 to 60 detectives working that division. And the 5 years I was there, we never made one arrest.
Wow.
And that sounds strange, but we are prohibited from making arrests by the chief of police because, as you know, Ed, if you make an arrest, then a person has a right to discovery and deposing people and calling the policemen as witnesses. And that's the last thing the chiefs wanted, because it would open up a huge can of worms of illegal operations. And when I say that, I'm talking about illegal wiretaps. When I was there, we had 2 full-time electronic experts who made tracking devices for us before they were, made by Apple and everybody else. It was just a matter of they would make them. We'd call them bird dogs, and we could put them on a car, and it would transmit, and we could follow the person from a distance away. They had small mics that were inserted into hotel rooms, into offices, into cars to bug conversations, and obviously wiretapping was going on. But since none of it was used for criminal prosecution, the chief of police and the LAPD attorneys always said, well, you're allowed to do that as long as you don't use it in a criminal prosecution. You're allowed to do all those things. Even though they're illegal, you can do them. And so that's what the unit was doing for 50, 60 years.
Yeah, California is interesting because even when I talk to the PIs out there, it seems very common for this wiretapping to go on, where like in other places, people are just so shy about crossing those kind of lines. But it just seems like they're just Wild West out there, you know?
It was, and one thing is critically important for people to remember is that at the time I was there, the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department was actually the most powerful person within Southern California, probably within the state, because he wielded so much power by having these things done and not worrying about it, that a lot of people could be extorted or blackmailed, if you want to call it, and not for money, but for support of the chief of police, to support his objectives, or whatever they happen to be at the time. And it was a way to turn an enemy into a friend and to get a friend to become very close. So think about J. Edgar Hoover, what he did all the years, his personal files. That's what LAPD was doing.
Yeah, and you told us in the past there was a lot of crossover between CIA and LAPD.
Yes, absolutely. We ran several operations I'm aware of within the U.S. and outside the U.S. for the CIA, because as most people know, the CIA, theoretically, by law, they can't spy on Americans within the U.S. So what would happen is the CIA would, for a better term, contract out those investigations through the chief of police in L.A. and through other chiefs of police, and have their intelligence people run those operations, because we could spy on people, we could surveil them, we could do virtually anything we wanted, and then pass that information back to the CIA. So a lot of that was going on. I was involved in some of those. One, I was in Mexico City several times, and other places in Mexico for the CIA doing those operations under the LAPD umbrella. And the chief of police we had at the time, Daryl Gates, very few people knew, but he was a CIA agent, not an officer. An officer is somebody who works for them full-time. An agent is, for a better term, if you want to say, a contracted employee that they may call upon at some time. And so that's what he was doing for, my goodness, probably his entire career in LAPD. He was doing that. And I know that from him, and I know that from a guy who came from the CIA into LAPD intelligence regarding those sort of things. So, yeah, their hands regarding that are not clean. And fortunately, 95% of the time, I was able to avoid doing that for getting involved in other investigations, with mob guys or whatever. And somebody else had to run those operations and do them.
Yeah, I really encourage the audience to go back and look up on Spreaker, LA Secret Police Inside the LAPD Elite Spy Network. We go into all that stuff, great stories for 2 hours, into real minute detail into all those stories. Great stuff, man. So, Mike, what do you got on Frank Sinatra?
Oh, we have everything you can imagine. What we did in this book, Frank Sinatra and the Mafia Murders, is we, through sources that we had, through intelligence files that I was able to get my hands on and so forth from the FBI, from LAPD intelligence and other sources, we dug into his history regarding the mob. We didn't get, like a lot of books will get into Sinatra, talk about his singing career, movie career, and that. We pretty much stayed away from that. And our book focuses on his mob connections and how the mob actually controlled him throughout his entire life. And we start when was very young, and how he started meeting the mob guys when he was growing up. He would go to a local bar and restaurant where a lot of them ran, and he would sing for basically a grilled cheese sandwich and some cigarettes. And finally, after he got hooked up with Dorsey, Sinatra was close to Willie Moretti, who was basically an underboss of the Genovese family, and he's the guy who got Trump who got Sinatra out of his contract with Jimmy Dorsey. And that was done. People may have seen part of that in movies, but heard it. But it was true that Moretti and another guy named Carbo, they went in to Dorsey, and they saw him, and they said, basically, you're going to let Frank out of his contract with you for a lifetime contract. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He pulled a gun, shoved it in his face, put it in his mouth, and said, well, you're either going to sell the contract to us now, get rid of it, let him out, or you're going to have a bad ending today. And that's when he got out of his contract for basically $1. So that's where we really kick in a lot. And then we move it on to all the other families, Mafia families, and the individuals that he was associated with, that he was working with, and how through time some of the sources who knew him said that he was taking on the persona of a mob guy now and then. And he would start acting tough, talking tough. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to have your legs broken, and all this sort of stuff. And the mob, a few times that we're aware of, and we have them there, that he requested their, if you want to say, their assistance in doing something to somebody, getting him out of the way. And they basically said, that's fine, Frank, yeah, we'll take care of it, don't worry about it. And, they didn't follow through on it because they realized if they did, they were bright enough that it's going to draw heat to them. And if Sinatra came up in it, they couldn't trust him to keep quiet. And he was just if you want to say, a good money maker for them, so they just played along with him a lot. But they did help him out throughout his entire life.
Now, what about his family growing up? Like, you hear these stories about his mother was performing illegal abortions or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. When he was growing up, she was doing that. His father, at times, said he was heavily tattooed, and he was kind of a boxer and a tough guy, and that's where it really came into play, that she was doing illegal abortions, and the people would know about that would be the local mob. They would know who's doing things like that, and assist and send some of their, if you want to say, clients and their girlfriends to her for an abortion. So that was going on for a number of years. And while that was going on, like I said, Frank was meeting all of these mob guys, getting to know them, and they liked him. They thought he was a good little kid. Even when he was in his early 20s, he was a good kid. And they saw an opportunity to make some money, and they finally put up $50K, like Luciano and some of the other guys, to launch his career and publicize it, because they saw an opportunity to make some money. And obviously it worked quite well.
I always found it interesting too, the whole story about Jack Daniels, because he used to drink Jack Daniels, and that wasn't a well-known liquor back in those days. It was very obscure, and he made it famous. Because he always had that bottle of Jack Daniels, like free advertising. I guess did he? Well, you think he got a piece of the company or something like that? Or they paid him for that product placement?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know about that, and. That'd be up to if Jack Daniels wants to say anything about it.
Come on now. Yeah.
It just could be that at the time, it's just like the cigarettes that he smoked. He wasn't necessarily being paid, but if he was on camera or talking about it, he would pull out cigarettes. The same thing with drinking. He would pull out a drink, and Jack Daniels, he'd talk about it and go from there. But I think there was a lot of other whiskeys that he enjoyed beyond Jack Daniels.
Now, what about that woman who wrote the book Sinatra and the Mall, the one I met in Vegas? I tried to put you in touch with her, but you couldn't find her either. I haven't been able to find her for years. But did you get a chance to read the book, though?
No, unfortunately not.
Too bad. Yeah, she had great stories, man. Because she dated Sinatra when she was like 14 years old. And she was also dating some Jewish local mobster at the same time. She was dating both of these guys at the same time. Fascinating woman.
Sounds like Judith Exner in a way, but a younger version.
Yeah. Okay, so and then you also mentioned here, too, that some kind of CIA connections and FBI. What do you have there?
Yeah, well, what happened was, according to the sources, that when he was coming back up for his gaming license, he wanted a gaming license. He was trying to get one at Caesars to be, for a better term, the entertainment director at Caesars. And that was about 1980 or so. And he realized it was going to be a problem because he lost his license once before. His